but random chat showing up, before.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
Just at the audio.
I like the cold start. I've been trying to do the cold start for a while.
Yeah, the audio only listeners sometimes for like the pre-recorded stuff sometimes complain. They're like, next time can you like cut out the pre-chatter? And it's like, no, thank you for the suggestion, but no, I like it.
No, like, I like feeling like I just walked into something.
Yeah, it's
That's like, I think that's one of the charms of like the Twitter Spaces, that
mhm.
you just walk in at when they're in the middle of something, and I don't know, it feels quite nice.
Yeah. The thing that does annoy me is when there's like solo streamers, for example, that are they're just waiting for everyone to get on. They just sit there and check their phone and say, oh, "We got someone on. Who's next?" At least we're going to talk about something interesting,
All right,
like how much the live streaming thing sucks. So for
especially when they're not that popular.
yeah, just like me, right? But now now that I have everyone's attention here, I will draw attention to there is a little bit of a delay between what Carlos says and when you hear it, and that's okay. I trust you believe I'm not doing a deep fake or anything, that he's actually here with us. So I want to address that first, and then second,
I'd be pretty honored whenever people start rolling deep fakes of me.
yeah, well, I might have to just start some conspiracies, but yeah. So other than that, everything looks good. Got a couple people on YouTube now. That's pretty nice. Do we have any? Oh, one time is on
Hello,
Odyssey.
everyone.
Hey yo. All right, two on Odyssey. So two on each platform. Each major platform should be good enough. So hey everyone, I'm gonna roll the intro graphic real quick. Carlos is gonna have to watch this again to see what that looks like, but I don't think he cares. So I'm gonna do that, and we'll
To
just
see what
get
that looks
started.
like.
All right, and we're back, or
All right.
we're here to start. So, hey everyone, welcome to Friday once more. This is the Digital Cash Rundown, and I'm joined by the one and only, as far as I know, Carlos Cano. How's it going, man?
Not at all one and only, because every time I Google myself, there's like a Spanish singer that had the same name. So I'm just trying to out fame that one.
Yeah, well, you're the only one that matters. So, I mean, I don't care about any
I hope so.
singers or something like that. Who cares? But so, just so everyone knows, um, if you want to comment and join the live chat, you can join the live chat on uh, YouTube or Odysee mainly. I will see some things if they're on Twitter or some other things like that. I have had some Periscope things. Uh, Usually, I pay well, you guys, and make sure you got to pay if you want to have a comment that I'll talk about. However, the apparatus I use for that, Cointree, cointr.ee/the desert links, has all my links and stuff there. You can leave a donation with a comment. Unfortunately, the comment won't go through because Cointree's broken. But if you want to throw me some money, I'll still get the money.
Oof.
But since I can't actually like force you to, since the message it's broken right now because the volunteer developer just ran out of time, we're trying to get someone else to do it instead. But yeah, in the meantime, just imagine that you paid for every comment I read for free. So we'll just have to deal with that. So
All right. Just act like you deserve it.
yes, of course. So anyway, let's just get rolling with stuff. As usual, and this I've said this for the last few weeks in a row. It's been kind of a slow news week as far as like big ticket items that like, oh, did you hear what happened in the crypto space? But it's been a very fast paced week as far as like what all is actually happening under the scenes. It's just like usually, and part of that is a little bit hidden because of the headlines tend to be more than any other era be about price levels, like key resistance level at 50,000 for Bitcoin. Can it pass it or not? Blah blah blah. Or Ethereum hits big 4,000.
Do you
Yeah.
think? Do you think that's actually getting worse? I
Um,
feel like I feel like at least there's now like some tech stuff happening.
yes. So I don't think it's actually getting worse. I do think the crypto news outlets are finding price points much more newsworthy because crypto is becoming more mainstream than
Mm.
ever. but only as an investment class currently. It hasn't gotten the mainstream kind of appeal of actually using this stuff. And so it's newsworthy for people. Oh, did you see what Bitcoin's doing? You see what Ethereum? How about Doge? Like, they're reporting those news headlines of simple price points and like market analysis a lot more than they used to. But as I said, a lot is going on behind the scenes. Like, for example, this first one here about DeFi literacy. So universities are embracing DeFi education. A small number of universities are beginning to offer DeFi courses to help students and general public better understand the technology. And DeFi is supposedly around 130 billion USD right now. And so, yeah, a few universities like UC Berkeley, as it's called, University of California at Berkeley, added a massively open online course on DeFi to its fall 2021 semester offering, for example. So, DeFi hits the universities. What's your first take on this whole thing?
Let me just Google something because there's Berkeley with two E's, and then there's Berkeley with an EY, right?
It's the
So
EY.
what's the difference between those two? One of them is in California.
Yeah, I don't know the other Berkeley. I just know that the one with the Y at the end, the one we're talking about here, it's a pretty famous university. I would say infamous because it's one of the more left-leaning universities where a lot of the crazy stuff you see today, that was happening there like decades ago. In fact, I used to, an old colleague of mine used to be in the U.S. Marine Corps, and he ran the recruiting station in Berkeley. And it was almost like a war zone because it would get vandalized almost every day because the more left-leaning university students were very much hated, the Marines and the military. And this was during the Bush years, so like a long time ago when the whole left was anti-war. Now it's a little bit different, but it's still kind of interesting. So that's the Berkeley we're talking about. So, but on the greater subject of DeFi and stuff, it's kind of funny how how.
So I actually had talking about this one, this piece of news, because I was interviewing a project from Berkeley's startup accelerator. They have a blockchain accelerator as well. So they look like they're getting quite involved. And when I was thinking about this, I was living in Cyprus at the time that they rolled out the first masters in blockchain by any university ever. That was University of Nicosia. And I still get emails, or I still know people from there, and I hear from them every now and then. And the fun thing is, like, nowadays you have Coinbase itself sponsoring scholarships, and there must be something like that in these universities. So whenever you think about these new things added in universities, you have to think that there is some sort of corporate or industrial interest in having them like mass produce people with this kind of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering where the major interest is coming from.
Yeah, that's for sure. I'm not sure. It could just be a tech-based thing where they want enrollment up, and so they want people saying like, "Oh, these are the hot things that like I'll go sign up for that." I do think it's pretty funny though, because it's like when it's hitting the university course level, unless it's like a highly technical field. Like, for example, if it's a highly scientific field, then I understand. If it's not a highly scientific field, then university is usually old news. That's where you go when it's like, it's like boomer stuff. It's like no one went to university. None of us went to university for blockchain anything. That didn't exist at the time. We just learned.
No, we didn't go to university to learn how to do crypto podcasts.
Yes, of course. Or podcasts at all. I'm sure you can go, but it's like by the time you learn like all the stuff from university courses, the tech and the approaches have changed, and it's just like, are they going to have courses on TikTok? Well, I mean, maybe now, but the people who started their careers doing a lot of TikTok, for example, there was no university course. They just had to learn it. So it's kind of funny how like university always lags behind, the rest of the space.
And you have to also wonder what are they teaching in there because, okay, you do a DeFi course.
Mm-hmm.
What DeFi are you teaching? Like, are you teaching people how to like operate the decentralized casino, or are you teaching them about NFTs and shit? Or
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. Was there a curricula posted somewhere? I couldn't find it.
Yeah, I guess not yet, but that will be interesting to see what the curriculum has, and also what it will say about how much that'll change with like the regulatory space with DeFi, because I heard, again, this is not something I didn't pick up. I pick up the headline, but I heard rumor about Uniswap starting to be investigated by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, which is sort of like a, as Eric Voorhees put it, it was like what took him so long kind of thing. And that's an interesting thing to think about because that could really mold the way the space goes based on how it works. Because there is a Uniswap company that is a centralized entity, and there's also a Uniswap decentralized protocol that is developed by the centralized company. And so we'll see pretty soon how that ends up shaking out as far as who's doing what, as far as what is regulated, what
Mm-hmm.
isn't. And I'm sure that'll impact like university courses and things like that in the future. So it'd be funny, like by the time you update your syllabus, everything could be completely wrong.
I went to I got a marketing degree from my
Mm-hmm.
university, and they were teaching us how to like buy radio ads and shit. And
Yeah.
you better believe that I've never purchased a radio ad in my life, and that I wouldn't think that's a good idea. So whenever I got out, I just had to relearn everything from scratch,
Mm-hmm.
which took time, and there's also not like a clear curricula as you go through life. But looking into this Uniswap thing, because
Mm-hmm.
that's also a topic that interests me.
Yeah.
If you have a company and you have a CEO and you have an office and you have employees and all that, you cannot pretend like everything you do is 100% decentralized, even if your protocol lives on the blockchain, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's gonna be a fight, I think, to define which more like where to draw. And I think there is a decent case to be made for every single crypto to eventually be categorized as a security,
Mm.
which I wouldn't want to see, but I think they would they would have a decent case, don't you think?
Possibly. It depends. It depends on who develops them and why. So, for example, if it's everyone points to like the Bitcoin use case as like Bitcoin's pure or whatever. And obviously it's not that simple, but there are some the truths to that in that it was an anonymous group or person who started it. Uh, did not there was no monetary value of this. This person did not buy tokens or sell them to people or distribute them to people. They just created software that anyone could use. Anyone kind of acquires the tokens and then uses them later. No money in development, etc. And it's really hard to see like so how could it be a security if it has no guarantees with it and it's not promoted and it's not even distributed? Now, if you have a company that is like a let's just say Zcash, for example, it's a 100% mined company.
Going to see cash, but
Yes.
wouldn't you say that then there is people distributing it, and let's call them Binance or Robinhood or whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
people that are selling Bitcoin at spot levels.
Well, maybe, except those people aren't issuers of the token themselves. They just happen to be resellers. And so you could go after them to
Hmm.
be, I guess, illegal brokers or something. And there's a U.S. law, which, I hate all that stuff. So don't expect you have a positive view on that. But there's a U.S. law going through the legislature right now to basically make crypto exchanges and such register as like basically like as securities brokers. And so basically there would be regulation on exchanges, but like not the actual producers of the code itself, at least not under that section. There's other worse sections that would try to make um, you know developers of decentralized software do that as well, which is like very strange, but whatever. It is what it is. The thing is, with this whole DeFi thing, I do think that yes, it is going to
What
be.
was the Zcash thing?
Yeah, as far as the Zcash thing, Zcash is also something that's mined from zero. Like anyone can run a mining software, anyone can distribute it. The difference is one company produced the entire code, and that same company also receives money. And so the people who, if you hold a Zcash token, part of the inflation of that token is going to, or they've changed things recently as far as, I guess the decentralization of the structure. But in the beginning, for at least like several years, it was all to one company. So when you bought a Zcash token from anyone who minted it, any miner, you paid in inflation, right, to the centralized company that built the whole thing. And then that's like, okay, is that a security? I don't know. That's a little, I still think no, but that's a little more sketchy. And then you have people who had anything that had a pre-mine, right? So for example, Decred, while mostly pretty DAO like today, had a pre-mine. Digibyte had a small pre-mine. A few of these ones, Ethereum, of course, had like the big pre-mine and ICO. That was like how Ethereum is not a security is kind of weird because the SEC at the time did come up with an opinion that Ethereum may have started out with a security, but by now it's kind of like transitioned into not a security, so they won't attack it or something, which is a little bit strange. I don't know if they're going to keep to that, but anyway.
That's something that you were saying when you were on my show.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that a lot of things that people, or that's the way I interpreted it anyways.
Yes.
Maybe you were talking about something else, but what I got from it,
Mm-hmm.
it was that a lot of things that we understand as like values and ideas of the decentralized world,
Mm-hmm.
they were like things projects as lawyers invented in order to get away with certain things, right?
Yeah,
So
stable
like
coins.
this concept of the utility token, which was basically like which was basically like an idea that they had in Ethereum to sort of like not get classified as a security from the very beginning.
Yeah, it is true. It's a little
So
bit.
it's just funny to think about that.
Yeah, it will, and it's funny because the DAO, like DeFi, I think is going to be the same type of a thing, which it kind of goes to this next thing on like the DeFi subject, which is OKEx, the cryptocurrency exchange, is launching a NFT and a DeFi hub. And it's important that users will be able to import NFTs from other supported platforms like OKEx Chain. Of course, they have their own chain, to OKEx and NFT marketplace where they can buy, sell, trade, supposedly with zero fees. And the new DeFi hub requires a connection with OKEx Wallet, which is a multi-chain decentralized wallet offered by the exchange as a browser extension. Now, I think that's pretty interesting that I don't know if I trust any decentralized architecture deployed by a centralized business under the exact same name as the business. Do you know what I mean?
That's my feeling in general with Binance Smart Chain.
Yeah.
So you would use it because it's cheap, and people would use it's cheap, and it helps them with like their ERC20 tokens and all that. But and they sort of have made a point to like not take the decentralization part too seriously. Like the whole way they avoid the criticism on their centralization is basically saying like, okay, but do you really care that much? And people have proven to not care that much. I think that's fine.
True.
Like you should be able to care about whatever you want. But OKEx, it also depends on how big the centralized player is in it. Because I, for example, I'm a big Binance user. I know I shouldn't be, but at some point it just gets so convenient, and they're like so big that I'm like, okay, this is like I do it because it's easy, but I know it's not 100% right, and it's not 100% what I should be doing. But who knows who takes? With smaller ones like OKEx, I would be a little bit more worried.
Yeah. And even Binance has had to deal with a lot of this stuff lately. But I think it's funny the way we see, like, in a free market environment, everything follows, demand. There's always consumer demand somewhere. And DeFi has been a possibility technically for a few years now. And the technology's been around, but centralized exchanges are kind of in competition with DeFi because whatever. And it's kind of funny to see a lot of the big DeFi pushers are CeFi. And it's funny for two reasons. First off, which I don't necessarily think is going to be as big of a factor, but there is a possibility that a factor is they think that they won't be able to compete with DeFi, so they want to get into DeFi early so that they still have a seat at the table. But the bigger thing I think is it's kind of a way to get around regulation. Like, they see on the horizon all these regulators are going to start cracking down, but they're like, no, we're DeFi. We can't stop it. Seriously, it's not us. We just branded it, created it, run the entire infrastructure of it and everything, but it's not us. I think that's kind of what they're going for with that. What do you think?
Well, I just wanted to ask you about that because you had this episode with Eric Burris, and that's pretty much a little, not in the exact same way, but that's what they did, right? Like they're foreseeing pushback from some reason, I mean, from some fronts, and what they're doing is like proactively decentralizing everything so that there's nothing to actually push back. So, do you think that tactic will fly?
Well, I do kind of think it will. And so let me explain with the Voorhees thing. He created a business and it did its job, whatever. At some point, they faced regulatory pressure and they did a move in order to become compliant that basically destroy their business. Like no one is going to use KYC shapeshift.
90% loss of users.
Yeah, so it decimated their business, and so it was a very quick like adaptation. Like we have to be like a DEX platform now. We have to combine decentralized exchanges, otherwise we literally have no business model. But then very soon after that, they decided to turn the company into a DAO, and I think that is a mix of practical and philosophical reasons. Like I think it's a little bit of it like, oh, we don't want to be regulated, but it's also a little bit of foresight being like, we don't have to be a DAO yet, but we will at some point or they will regulate the crap out of us. So let's get started on this now. We learned our lesson the last time. We decided to be passive rather than active on this. And so that's why you see Shapeshift turning into a DAO right now. And, Coinbase is not, Binance is not really. A bunch of these other big players are not yet because they don't have to yet. They're doing the DEX part because they have to, but they're not doing the DAO part yet because they don't have to yet. And so I do think that at some point everyone will have to sort of move in that direction. Now, the thing is, the SEC commissioner, I forget which one of them, said that they're investigating DeFi projects that pretend to be DeFi but are actually CeFi. And it's interesting he said that before going after Uniswap, whereas Uniswap is, there's a centralized company that runs a decentralized protocol. Now, of course, if it's a decentralized autonomous organization that's running a decentralized protocol, that's different, maybe. But it's only different if they're actually a DAO and not a DAO in name only. If like the same like two founders control like 80% of the voting tokens and it just everything runs, and then they all have their own bank accounts anyway and stuff, that's when it starts to become where they will still be vulnerable to this sort of thing.
And just because I don't want it to seem like I'm taking digs at Shapeshift, I would say that Shapeshift is a product that most of us don't use. Like people don't use it. Like they decimated their business, they decimated their audience, but we still care a lot about Shapeshift or we still comment on Shapeshift, we still read the news about Shapeshift, and people still report on them because of Eric, and because of that they know that there are people with a very progressive philosophy for the industry in there, right? So
yeah,
the fact that they're taking this step to be the first ones to go full DAO without anyone forcing them into it, they're I mean, they have the reputation that they have for a reason. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, and they're ahead of the game that they need to be. because of, just being like ahead of the game on Bitcoin, for example, as Eric Voorhees was. And then he created one of the first use cases for Bitcoin, which is gambling, the Satoshi dice and stuff, which is still the number one use case for crypto, is people want to like throw a bunch of money at stuff and see if they win big. And so, yeah, I think it's kind of like a pioneer. Of course, Shapeshift is not a DEX; it's a DEX platform, but it's it's kind of late. I would say late to the DEX game, but not early either. Not the first DAO either, by 5, 6, 7 years or whatever it is, but also relatively early to the DAO game. There's a bunch of DAOs now, but there's not mainstream yet. And so it'd be interesting to see if they manage to keep on innovating and staying ahead of the curve. Which, by the way, reminds me that this other one right here is that Shapeshift is open sourcing its upcoming version 2 platform code, and basically they're I think that I don't know how much of this is like it's theatrics or it's like survival mechanism, and how much of it is like they're trying to do cool things. But that is a kind of an interesting thing to think about, because if they have a closed source code for their permissionless infrastructure, and they have like a DAO and everything that builds closed source code, it's harder to make the case that that's a decentralized autonomous organization. But if it's all open source, first off, it's a lot easier to make that case, but it's also easier to, if, their DAO or their whatever gets shut down by the government, then it's easy for the same people to just sort of like fork their own code and then start it up somewhere else, kind of a thing. So it's kind of like a censorship resistant angle, or it might just be a thing that they want to make sure that their work persists even if they don't profit from it. So I don't know, which one do you think it is?
And you have, I don't know how much is Eric Voorhees worth, but I would think that if you're a crypto punk, cypherpunk, with fuck you money, why wouldn't you just say fuck you, right? Like, if you just if you already profited, if you're working on the crypto industry because you like it, because you enjoy it, then why wouldn't you just like do everything open source, do everything for the benefit of the community, keep the profit in the back of your mind at some point? But it's also a defensive move, right? Like one of these game theory strategies. If you develop something that people can fork whenever they want, and therefore you make it open source, you're actually discouraging the regulator or the bad guy or whoever to coming in to try and get you, because then what's the point of them trying to get you if they're gonna have to go get the next guy?
Yeah, of course.
So it's both I think a proactive move and a defensive move, but also, well, same thing we were saying. We hold these people in high regard because they've proven that they want to do things for the community just because they like it.
Yeah, that's for sure. I do think it's like a proactive move. The thing about crypto is, I think the crypto space has moved forward in terms of a lot of development and a lot of money in the space over the last 8 years I've been in the space. I've seen a lot of money come in, and I've seen a lot of things being built. Recently, and maybe it's just that it's taken a long time for them to build, I've seen a lot of innovation. Innovation has not always been very constant. There was a lot of people just copying, pasting Bitcoin or like doing nothing new for a long time. But there's a lot of innovation now, I would definitely say. But the thing is, like, Bitcoin was kind of a radical decentralization of finance. Maybe an imperfect way, but there's still, I feel like a lot of the crypto space took Bitcoin's example and went backwards a little bit in terms of decentralization, for example, at least for a while. And so what I'm looking forward to now is, like, a lot of people are screaming about, oh, this regulatory pressure, the government's coming for us and all this stuff. And yes, that's a bad thing. However, it's also kind of kicking everyone in the ass in crypto who's just been lazy about what this is all really about, which is decentralized, censorship-resistant finance.
And I mean, I'm going to backtrack a little bit
Okay.
because we're on the digital cash network anyways,
Of
right?
course.
So at the beginning we talked about the decentralized casino. We talked about how that's
Mm-hmm.
mostly the use case for these things, and how most people are just, well, most news sites, that's
Mm-hmm.
their lazy way of doing things, right? Just talking about prices all day long,
Of course.
because you know that's what's going to drive clicks. I know you're a journalist, and I
Yeah.
know that you don't do this kind of journalism,
That's why my
but
channel's teeny and it sucks. You know?
yeah, that's why we don't get the likes, because we don't talk
Yeah.
about technical analysis. But isn't it just? I don't know. What's your take on technical analysis in general?
Mm.
Because I was having an argument earlier today with someone that I told them, hey, there's this very cool coin. It's like 10 million market cap, and they just started their own testnet phase. No one cares about them. It looks cool. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
And I got pissed off because their reaction was, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I just looked at the chart. No thanks. And you're like, at some point, you have to think that you're using these instruments to measure everything in the world, and they don't apply to some things. And I don't think anyone using technical analysis, or 90% of people using technical analysis,
Mm-hmm.
even know why they use the tools that they use. What's your experience with this kind of thing?
Yeah, well, I don't do TA at all, and I never really tried, and I see what people are saying, and so when I see, here's the thing about TA from my very limited experience, my uneducated opinion. So don't be like, oh, you know what you're talking about, because yes, that's right, I do not know what I'm talking about. But that being said, I do think that technical analysis can is more accurate than pure guesswork when it comes to all other things considered. So, for example, if there's like a basic coin out there that nothing much is changing or going on, I think that you can have technical analysis can tell you where it trades from there a little bit. It can help you because, traders tend to follow patterns where they're like, oh, at this price, we're going to sell half, we're going to do this, we're going to see that. But the problem is so much of market price is driven by external factors. So, like, where were all those technical analysis experts on Dogecoin like the week before Elon Musk made his first tweet? Like
Exactly.
they were just like, oh, it's going down, and then one dude says one dumb Twitter thing. It's not even indicative of anything bigger. Like he just tweeted something about Dogecoin, and then all of a sudden, all the TA goes out the window. So I think that if TA could be it could be useful for professional traders in like short term things about like they already know what they think are good projects. They already know what's gonna do well and what isn't through other information. And the technical analysis is just kind of a timing tool of like where do I get in or out. But like as far as predicting projects success or anything, like I looked at the chart. No thanks is like the dumbest answer to the question that you asked that I could imagine because it has nothing to do with that.
And that is also, I took this chance to vent with someone that I knew that would agree with me,
Yes,
because that's what we do. But
of course.
but look, if you have a 10 million market cap coin,
Mm-hmm.
for example, like this one, and you're just sharing opinions with a friend,
Mm-hmm.
it's very dumb that you're using the same tool that you would use to measure all the price movements of gold, let's say, or Bitcoin, or whatever assets is already quote unquote established,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to something that someone can rock up with $5 million and buy up the whole thing, right?
Yeah, of course.
It just doesn't make sense to use the same tools for everything. And that's what I see a lot in these news websites as well. That whenever someone comes up with the catchphrase or with the idea, everyone starts parroting it. You
Mm-hmm.
saw it with COVID, man. Like
Of course.
whenever someone started with the smash the curve, then it's smash the curve here, smash the curve there, smash the curve there, and then it's like vaccines, whatever catchphrase are at the moment. And I don't know. I get worried that these that we're short circuiting
Mm-hmm.
our reasoning by using this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think so too. And you see this kind of thing happening where uh, a lot of what people's perception is on projects and their future and their prospects is based on what they think other people will do. So when they look at it, it's like the chart. Like, what are other people going to do? Is it worthwhile? Or what a lot of people do, like, for example, Dogecoin pumped is all the rage. And then people started making these Doge-based tokens like Shiba Inu and other things like that. And not because of any actual value, but just they thought, oh, this is hot, so other people will buy this, so I'm going to do that now. And then some people are like, oh shit, someone just made another dog coin. I know it has no value, but I'm going to buy it because I think other people will buy it too. And then they were right, you know. Some of them were. And then it went up. There's a lot of that kind of stuff. I think it's funny to see. I recently interviewed Amari Sachet, who's the guy who used to run Bitcoin. He ran Bitcoin ABC, which is the big Bitcoin Cash implementation. And then they forked off into a minority chain. They recently rebranded it to eCash. And one thing that they did was they multiplied the supply by 1 million. So if you had one Bitcoin ABC, you now have 1 million eCash. And also as part of their strategy, they're going to use Avalanche, the Avalanche protocol, which is, there's the Avalanche coin, but they're using the same kind of technology behind that, which is very popular and sexy right now. And so the combination of those two things, all of a sudden the price has gone absolutely crazy. I think in most market sites like CoinMarket, they still call it Bitcoin ABC, but it's gone really crazy lately because a lot of people, and that's the second most popular video on my channel now, is that interview from like last week, I think, because all these like people are saying, yes, eCash to the moon, woo, and they're all like jumping on it. And then, it's because it's not all, I'm going to buy a whole Bitcoin ABC for like $12 or whatever it was. It's like, for only $12, I can get 1 million eCash. And if, the psychological game plays. And so then they all buy it and then the price goes crazy. And then I've had some people saying, I've seen it being said in other communities like, Bitcoin Cash, but also like Dash, say we need to multiply our supply by a huge amount too, because otherwise no one will use it at stores or some shit like that. And it's like, that they're saying, so we can get the pump too. And it's just like, no, dudes, no. Like, you're going to regret it. Like, it's such a dumb thing. It's not going to, just like we should brand to a dog coin. Like, no, that's going to be done.
So what was there? Okay, I'm all up for people rebranding all the coins to dog coins and just get over with that. Count me in for that. But if you want to, what was the reasoning for multiplying their supply?
So the reasoning I think is when you have, so Hilawi in the comments just said it works because the average investor is dumb. So yeah, that's true. But I think their reasoning for that is because it can be a better unit of account in the future. So if you think about it, if you have 21 million Bitcoin, there's a lot more than 21 million people on the planet. And so let's say everyone has Bitcoin, they're going to have a small fraction of it for their entire wealth. And then they're going to be spending a very small fraction of that. So it just mathematically is just difficult with that that small of a supply with that big of a number of potential users. But if you have 21 trillion Bitcoin or something like that, then it's a lot easier to be like, oh, it's like 4 Bitcoin for this loaf of bread or whatever. It's a lot easier to do. So I guess that's the reasoning, which that reasoning is, I guess it's good long-term. If you're starting a new project, you might want to denominate like that. Sure. But to redenominate just messes up your whole, like all the exchanges get all messed up. All your wallets get messed up. Just a lot of stuff starts to break. Like everything just gets destroyed if you try to do that midway through a project. And the problem, if you want to do that, like no one is pricing goods and services in crypto now. And even in the future, Bitcoin, if let's just say Bitcoin becomes what everyone uses, which, we'll see what Lightning does. But if everyone uses Bitcoin through Lightning, things will be priced in Satoshis probably, right? And you don't need to do a redenomination of all Bitcoin to do that. But so if people are saying, oh, we got to do it now or no one's ever going to use it, it's like, well, I think that all I'm hearing is please pump my coin, sir.
Yeah, a lot of that. And you would also, I mean, I was an investor in this project, RFox, Red Fox.
Mm-hmm.
It was based on the Komodo chain.
Okay.
And at some point, they decided to jump off Komodo and become an ERC20 token. Don't quote me on that. I don't remember if this was 100% the story for reasons that
Mm.
don't matter to this conversation.
Yeah, of
But
course.
they did this. They did like 10x, 3x, something like that, the
Mm-hmm.
token supply. So you had to do the swap, and I didn't even have my own coins because I invested as a part of a group and someone else. So whenever they return me my coins, I'm like, holy fuck, I'm rich. And then like you look at the yeah, like you look at everything that happens, and there were a lot of confused people. There were a lot of people that didn't know what was going on. That if you looked at the chart, it probably spooked a lot of people because then you just see like this one big red candle, which is when everything, all of this took place, and then people get excited and then they do whatever. And going back to the unit of account, I was thinking that's
Mm.
a reason as well why I wouldn't think it doesn't make sense for me to think about Bitcoin being used as like the mainstream money, just because everything would have to be denominated in like 0 point multiple zeros of satoshis, just because it's just a very it would be very complex numbers. And I know that in India they have a currency like that, like the rupee is also very,
Plentiful.
you would not consider 10,000 of them a lot. And
Yen as
then they have
well.
like these subcategories like the crore
Mm-hmm.
and all that. So maybe. But since we're talking news, did you see that they published El Salvador's setup for Bitcoin payments? It turned out a bit of a mess, and I think Strike is pulling out of it.
Are they
But
pulling
don't quote
out?
me on that.
Interesting. So this is what I really have to figure out. I do. So I am interviewing someone who is down there. I documenting the stuff early next week, so I'll know a lot more then. But uh,
Hmm?
I have heard that first off, on the Bitcoin Beach, they set up with a special Bitcoin Beach app, which is geo locked, which means if you're like an American tourist or something, you don't have the app that works for that. And then they also had on Bitcoin Beach Strike usernames for in the Strike app, and you could pay it through other Lightning invoices, but there's some complications with that. And then I hear that in El Salvador, by like countrywide, they have a Chivo wallet, which I think is a little bit of a funny name for a crypto wallet, but they have like a special wallet issued by the government
Yeah.
or I don't know if it's issued by the government or it's just endorsed by the government, but then that's what people will use.
I think Shiba is the official government wallet.
Yeah, and it's funny. Like, do you actually know the history behind why they decided to do that name?
I know that Chivo in El Salvador is something like dude. Like
Mm,
Chivo would mean goat, right?
yeah,
And so it's like a weird word to name to name anything after. Although the most popular football club in Mexico is called Chivas,
yeah,
but
of course. They should just call
I
it the.
think in El Salvador that actually means bro or something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just very regional. They should just call it the Cabron wallet and just be done with it.
Nah.
But it it's funny that like this Bitcoin. Like, I hope I have to do some research into the Chivo wallet, but I'd like to see if it's compatible with other native Bitcoin things, such as Lightning Network or on-chain Bitcoin. I wonder if it's compatible with those things at all, or if it's just a special thing.
So they published this diagram.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I was trying to see if I could find it, but no, I need to go deeper into Twitter, and I don't want to be typing a lot during this. But they published this diagram which shows you how the whole Chivo thing is going to work. and it connects to quite a few centralized exchanges, of course.
Yes.
And then it also connects to an official technology that they use to plug into their own reserves that they haven't even purchased yet.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the government's reserves.
Yeah.
And so the one of the main ones that they use is Bitso, the Mexican exchange, which
Yeah.
is already like Latin America's biggest exchange. So that sort of makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it people were calling it a clusterfuck because it was a bit of a complex setup.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that would necessarily apply given the size of the operation of having Bitcoin as legal tender in a whole country, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's at the very least it's interesting that it's just not straightforward at all.
Mm. Yeah. And obviously, if you demand, if you, the problem is you legislate by force in that way. That it's not just, well, you can. It's like, no, you must. And if it's like, well, you must do that, and then they're like, well, how do I qualify for this? And it's like, what qualifies as Bitcoin acceptance? Like, do you have a paper wallet with a little QR code and that's it? Or like, do you have like a, like, what if you just want to take Bitcoin SV, for example? Is that like you take Bitcoin? Like, what if you have like an app? What if you have an exchange wallet? What if you say you accept an exchange wallet? What if you just have a Coinbase account and like almost no one in El Salvador like can use that or something? Or like because of the complexities, of course, they had to offer a default solution. The problem is I think we learned that I mean, as I've been telling people for years, no one is using crypto. It's like me and five other people. It's like no one. And so the system is not caught up to,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I think there was an interesting comment on Reddit this week.
mm-hmm,
I'm quite active there. I promote all the stuff I do in there. So I'm in there a lot. And someone was wondering whether, for example, in the UK, the regulations against
mm-hmm,
buying and selling bitcoins would change because it could now in theory be considered as forex trading since it's already a country's official legal tender.
mm-hmm,
And that's an interesting one. I don't think that the powers that be are going to just start accepting it as forex just because El Salvador, a small country that's been thoroughly fucked by the FMI,
mm-hmm.
is taking it as legal tender. But if they would start thinking of it as forex, then that's a big step for the industry, isn't it? Then the
Yeah.
ramifications do get interesting of this El Salvador thing.
Yes. I have yeah. I haven't made a lot of friends speaking about El Salvador lately because I haven't had a complicated kind of position on it. Part of it is I think that the law itself is a shitty bad law. I think that a country accepting it as legal tender and doing and like saving people from capital gains on it and just the actual like promotional value of a whole country adopts this, I think that's all very good. I also predicted that the implementation of this would be an absolute clusterfuck. And there's like a 3 month old video that I did. I think it was like early May, like at the beginning of May, where I just say like why it's going to be an absolute disaster. And everyone's like, man, what are you talking about, bro? You're just salty and all this kind of stuff. And it's just because, I've been sending and receiving Bitcoin transactions for 8 years now. I run my own Lightning node, which is this computer in the corner right here. Like I, I know what I'm talking about, and I know you can't just say, "Oh, everyone just jump aboard." I know there's got to be some sort of a. It's going to be very difficult unless you present a centralized solution that's like guaranteed by the government. But even then, how many times does Coinbase go offline in like high trading volume things, and they're like veterans of the space? You just think this new service is going to come up, onboard like 6 million people or however many there are, and then you just won't have any problems at all? Like, I'm not that optimistic, but yeah, I'd encourage people to go back and look at my prediction video and just see
But
how.
even if they have problems,
Yes.
uh-huh. But even if they have problems, are don't you think it's just since it's an option.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if there are problems, it's not like everyone's gonna be 100% into Bitcoin, right? There's gonna be a few crazy people here and there that
Yeah.
are, but until the whole thing is completely proved and everyone knows that it works 100%, people are
Mm-hmm.
not just gonna start using it from night to day.
Yeah, of course.
So I don't know. We'll see. Um, there's been I remember, and I remember saying this is gonna lead nowhere, and
Mm-hmm.
also like no one liked this opinion. But
Mm-hmm.
whenever Salvador just announced that, you remember that there were like a bunch of politicians from all over Latin America trying to trying to get trying to get votes or trying to get popular or getting Twitter
Mm-hmm.
followers, announcing that they were going to be pioneering the same thing with Bitcoin in their own countries,
Yeah,
which of course led to absolutely nowhere. That was
of
funny, man.
course. Yeah, and it makes absolute sense because the real reason, like, there's no I don't think there's any tangible benefit to the actual citizens of the country to have this situation forced on them the way it was. Like, I don't think it's actually good for the country necessarily. Now, what I do think, though, is it was an astute move. Like, no one even knew where El Salvador was for the most part. You know, I mean, I
Hmm.
love Salvadorian food, for example. Like, I know, but like most people don't. And it's not necessarily a rich country from what I know. And it's a move to attract a lot of attention and foreign investment, and specifically saying this is a big industry. We want to make a big splash and show us that this is a very favorable climate to build your business in if you're in this emerging and exciting industry. And on those metrics, it worked really well. Like, I'm pretty sure. Again, I don't know how many people have moved their business or are investing into the country now, but I think that there's a lot more than there were before the announcement. Don't you think?
That's the thing, and that's why I wouldn't call it a failure,
Mm-hmm.
even if the whole Bitcoin thing doesn't roll out quite well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the fact that they're progressive in favor of crypto companies moving there, tech companies moving there,
Mm-hmm.
there could be a case to be made there that maybe that benefits only the elites of the country and that only benefits the richest people in there, uh, because people often equate all foreign investment equal good, and sometimes it's not.
Mm-hmm.
But if, just for the sake of making the argument simpler, you would side with, okay, foreign investment equal good, then that's a rotten win, right? There's no
Mm-hmm.
way to say that it didn't manage to do its job.
Yeah, it didn't
Salvador
necessarily
has been
manage to do its
historically,
stated objective. It accomplish its covert objective.
exactly. So Salvador has been one of these countries where, they've been paying a debt that they incurred with the FMI for
Mm-hmm.
FMI. What was the no FMI is the
The IMF, I
Spanish.
think they call it.
IMF, yeah, and in
Yes.
Spanish is Fondo Monetario Internacional.
Yeah.
Anyways, um, they've been paying the interests on that debt for ages now, and they're thoroughly fucked by it.
Mm-hmm.
And they continue to. I mean, they're at the point where they cannot pay off their debt.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to use these kind of maneuvers to drive money into the country doesn't seem like a bad idea to me.
Of course.
Like you said, that's not the explicit objective, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you can only judge
Mm-hmm.
you can only judge by what was stated and not by the ramifications. Mm, honestly, I don't think. Another thing is, like, if more countries started doing the same, I think the effect will start dying off, wouldn't it?
Yeah, as I mentioned with Dogecoin and Elon Musk, I just said what he is doing is he's inoculating the crypto market. He's doing like the Elon vaccine so that the whole crypto market is less resistant to stuff like this in the future. Whether he thinks he's doing that or not, I think he's smart enough to know that that will be the end result. But that's like now all of Twitter is like saying, "Oh, Dogecoin, Elon's gonna tweet, it's gonna go up," and like every tweet is a smaller bounce, a smaller movement, and so I think that obviously that was the smart part of what El Salvador did, what Bukele did at least, was the whole just being the first at doing something so big and bold, and because the next country that does a better version of his law and has better infrastructure, more technology, and has thought this through a lot better, and will not get the same benefits that he will, or at least not the same PR benefits, not the same kind of thing, because and then the third country will be even less, and then on and on. And so if he figures, if he wants to make something that's very big and popular, or very make a lot of headlines, he picked the right thing to do, to be like the first doing that. But as far as like benefits from actually the integration and stuff, a lot of different places could probably do it better.
When we were talking about the IMF, dude, I remember that I forgot to ask you last time.
Yes.
What's your background? Like, where does your name come from?
My parents are, my dad is Mexican, at least.
All right.
Yeah, they have a little ranch in Sonora.
In Sonora?
Yeah.
All right. I'm from next state, from Chihuahua.
Yeah, nice. I've been there.
And I wanted to ask you as well. What do you think about this? It seems to me that every day that happens, I see more and more competitors to Ethereum solidifying their use cases. And I'm not talking Cardano here, because Cardano is a bit of a joke already, the fact that they don't have smart contracts at this time. But for example, the Thesos chain, there's a lot of stuff happening in there, and I think they're poised to be an interesting competitor in this game, precisely because no one's sort of expecting them. I don't know. Have you had a chance to take a look at all this?
No, and that is not deeply, and that's the one next homework assignment for myself, because I was just kind of, doing my own thing, and then I took a deep dive into Lightning just so I could learn how it worked and run my own node and stuff, just so I was educated on the issue. And then the next thing will be all these different like smart contract type chains, because now that's like everything. If you aren't one of those, no one throws money at you. You have to be Bitcoin or Dogecoin, or you have to be a smart contract chain. Like, that's literally it. That's what the market is selected for currently. Now, Cardano is very interesting in that, first off, it was sort of modeled after Dash. I remember when Hoskinson was poking around in like the Dash Slack channels and stuff back in 2016, I believe, asking questions about governance, and then he modeled Cardano's governance thing, at least partially after that. But I think it's interesting because it's just all the hype and without performing the actual function, which makes me think that a lot of this stuff is not, there's a market demand for smart contract functionality. It's more of, that's a signal of next level technology, and people want to speculate on whichever technology will be used. So all that being said, I'd have to actually look into what each of these does. The thing about Ethereum that I think the reason why Ethereum is the big daddy, the big daddy other than Bitcoin, is that people are using Ethereum's functionality for things today. Now, what those things are is it's not necessarily mainstream type things, but people have been doing lots of tokens like ICOs. That was a big boom. They've been making a lot of NFTs, and they've been doing a lot of DeFi on Ethereum. And so Ethereum has shown the value of all these kinds of things, and every other chain, are sort of trying to like catch up on that, I guess. But what I'd like to see is like, what are the actual things that in the, the use case, right? What is the use case long term? Obviously, tokens are, I'm not sure if they're an overblown use case or if they're a use case that I'm kind of too stupid to see how huge they are. I think they are a definite use case, but like, that's a huge thing that everyone wants to do a token now, or for the last several years. DeFi is one that's a very solid use case. It's like, it's hype. It's a lot of hype and like free money kind of stuff, but it's also like exchanges and finance. All that stuff is a real thing. And if you run a decentralized version of that, that's basically as big of a case as decentralized money to begin with, or almost, which is kind of funny how DeFi seems to have a better shot at being used widely than digital cash first, even though digital cash is the most basic DeFi application, I guess you could say. And that's like one of the last ones to come around.
So, for fundraising more than tokens, I would say, fundraising, as in ICOs, IDOs, all this stuff. That is a big use case, and that's why I make fun of Charles Hoskinson a lot, because I feel like
Because it's funny.
I feel like he's
Because
very resentful.
also, I think he's younger than me, but he looks like my dad. That's another reason to make fun of him. But
Is he younger than you? How old is Charles Hoskinson?
I don't know, but
I'm looking this up
it's
right here
within
right
a couple of years. It's like very close. But, that's something that people have
Shit, Charles Hoskinson is 33 years old. You're right, man.
Yes.
He looks 50 something.
2 days ago, I turned 34, so I'm a little bit older than him. And even though he looks like that, but whatever.
Props for not looking like him, man.
Yeah.
But anyways, I would say, yeah, I make fun of him because he's just going so hard against Ethereum all the time, and like the number 2 trying to use the number 1 as a butt line. It's as the butt of a joke.
Yes.
That just doesn't. That never really catches up, right? You want to be a proud number 2 and a fair contestant, and not just be talking all the time about what you're better than the number 1.
Yes. I personally believe the balance is kind of like 50-50. You should be half of the time respecting your competitor, and the other half of the time explaining why you're better. But like instead of 100% of the time explaining why you're better, that's a little annoying.
And or the other thing is like, but that was the whole point. Like,
yeah,
this innovation comes in trends, right? So
yeah.
Everyone's copy pasting things, and every now and then someone has like an original thought.
Mm-hmm.
So the first original thought was like the ICO, then some DeFi stuff like borrowing and lending, then came other stuff, and nowadays it seems like we're stuck with DAOs and NFTs for a while.
Yeah.
And there are gonna be lazy implementations of these and not so lazy implementations of these.
Yes.
What I'm looking to see is in which chains are all of these CBDs gonna get put on.
The CBDCs?
Because that's gonna be determining of the future, I think.
So do you really think that CBDCs are going to be put on decentralized infrastructure?
Depends, because we don't know what's the official excuse for having a CBD, right? we know that it might look like something like crypto this, crypto future, blockchain, but we don't know what the official excuse is gonna be. If they attempt to get a sense of decentralization, then I think they might get put on one of these. But you're better informed when it comes to payments than I am, so I'll let you talk.
Yeah, so my opinion on CBDCs, and I forget who expressed this a little bit better than me, but someone smarter than me. There's lots of those out there. But CBDCs are fiat. They're just digital fiat. And fiat is already kind of digital, right? It's not just paper. It's mostly not paper. The problem is all the payment networks, the payment rails, as it were, of fiat are disconnected, especially in the U.S. The U.S. is horrendous like that. Europe, it's a little bit, tighter. But basically what I think CBDCs will be is just putting the dollar on a better payment rail that has more access to other kind of payment rails. It's just like, it's kind of like a more centralized payment network of the same type. And so just a more efficient fiat. But for one thing, do you think the government is going to create a radically transparent financial system where every last penny can be accounted for on a digital ledger that anyone can verify? No, I don't think so. And the other thing is, are they going to do a decentralized permissionless thing where anyone can run infrastructure on it and anyone can use it without KYC? Also no. So it's going to, in my view, it's going to be a fiat reboot that has, obviously different countries will do different central bank solutions, but I'm pretty sure that the only difference is it will be faster, cheaper, more efficient, because there will be fewer inefficiencies in the system to send and receive, and it will also be far worse from a surveillance and censorship standpoint. Whereas, like, if a bank wants to censor your payments or cut off an account, someone else, say the government, has to find you, figure out which bank you use, go to that bank and say, you need to go cut this guy off. There's like a little bit of a process. But in the future, if it's all into the same thing, the Federal Reserve headquarters will just shut you off right at the source and will also track all your payments. So, for example, I know that Google and MasterCard a few years ago entered into a data sharing agreement on customers because Google basically knows everything you spend online. And when you go in person and swipe a card in a physical merchant, Google doesn't have that data. So they entered into a data sharing agreement with MasterCard because they do have that data. But it's like they're trying to stitch together a full picture of people's financial history. Now, with CBDCs, I think you will just have the Federal Reserve or the central bank of whatever country, like the central bank of Nigeria with the e-naira, they'll just know everyone's payment history. And so from a privacy standpoint, it's going to be far worse than fiat is today, I think. Ooh, your sound kind of went off for a second there. I didn't hear that last sentence. All right, well, try to fix the microphone. Keep talking. I will keep looking at your face and I'll just make sound over it.
There we go. That should sound okay.
Yes.
That should sound okay. Cool. Yeah, I was telling you, my earphones died on me, so I'm just gonna quickly go get my headphones.
Yeah,
the big
no
ones,
problem.
I'll be right back.
I'll talk the filler. I'll do the filler content. Maybe sing a song or something.
Thank you. Coming right back.
Yeah. So that's the thing about CBDCs is as far as which networks they would be on, I know there's some sidechain platforms that could possibly be used. The problem is I cannot imagine a government running. I can imagine them doing a fork of something, but I can't imagine them running a side chain off of a decentralized project that, for example, they just trust some decentralized project to just run the whole thing. They go to them, they get their own little centralized sliver of this centralized project, and then just sort of run it like that, like an ERC20 kind of thing. Because sometimes there might be actions on the chain, whether it's downtime, like the chain's doing something poorly, or a change in functionality, or whatever it is that the government does not approve of or does not want. And at that point, I can't really see them trying to go to a decentralized entity or a centralized entity that develops on a decentralized chain and just saying, hey, you need to change things around for our specific use case. So I think, and I also don't think that government and central banks are innovators. So I can't imagine that a central bank would, basically I was just talking about how CBDCs would be deployed. I don't think they'd put it on a decentralized infrastructure that they can't control. And even if it's like a side chain of something else. And I also don't think they're innovators. Like, I also don't think that a central bank would build something cool from scratch. I think that they would fork a popular chain that does a lot of the stuff that they do and just make a centralized version of something. Did you see the first version of the Petro in Venezuela?
So, I mean, I heard of the Petro, but I never paid attention to that because you cannot take that government seriously. Like,
yeah,
they were just. I mean, you can't even the people that are like pro socialism in Latin America, they don't take them seriously because of the way that they've completely screwed over their country. Like, if you go to Buenos Aires, this is a very fun phenomenon to analyze. Depending in which country of Latin America or Spanish-speaking country foremost, depending in which country you are, you'll see the waves of Venezuelans. So if you go to Mexico or to Spain, you'd see the first wave of Venezuelans that emigrated, and that was like the the ones that had businesses, the ones that were sort of well off, and those were the first ones to take off. If you come to Argentina, you'd see like the mid wave, the
Mm-hmm.
ones that were like middle class,
Yeah.
somehow were able to do the move sort of without so much pain. But you go to Peru, you go to all the border countries, Peru, Colombia, all that, and you see all the last ones, the ones that had to leave because their families were starving.
Yeah.
So that's just a long way to say that I wouldn't pay attention to anything that government does. What I was wondering, it's this, because I don't know if you saw that panel that I did with Stephen Stoneberg from Bittrex, Sasha
Mm-hmm.
Ragunwala from Coinbase. It was a CEO panel,
Mm-hmm.
and I would say that Stephen Stoneberg, he's the CEO from Bittrex Global.
Yeah.
I would say that he is fully convinced 100% that at some point Bitcoin is going to be the gold standard of the world.
Yeah.
That he does believe it. Whether you think he's right or not, that's another thing. I personally
Mm-hmm.
think he's not right, but
Mm-hmm.
that that's certainly his thinking. And if you start imagining how that would look like, if we do achieve a Bitcoin standard of some sorts, then you have to wonder what role. Of course, we're not going to be using Bitcoin for payments. Like you said it when you were on my show, you don't use gold for payments. You use silver for payments.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you have to think about what role all the CBDCs are going to play in that kind of system.
Mm-hmm.
You have to wonder about what I don't know. Some people would conceive, and I think that was Stephen's point, that you would have Bitcoin being the digital gold, the thing that's everything. That's like the value layer, number one or zero, and then you have the CBDCs that move in there, and that's basically an even scarier proposition, I would say,
Yeah.
because then you have the mega elites, the governments, etc., hold all the real value, and you're just playing with these tokens, pun intended, that you trade with while they surveil you.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably true the way it's gonna shake out. Um, Now, as far as if you have like a global, the thing that I never quite bought into with the maximalist type argument is that Bitcoin will somehow become the global standard for store of wealth. First off, when it's so easily replicated, but also when it's so difficult to actually use directly. And it's like this is a techno. I understand that in a past world where you had to trade the physical asset, and then they came up with technology to help represent that asset. But now that you can have a equivalent technology, an equivalent asset with better technologies and more efficient for sending and receiving, for example, I can't really see that kind of happening. I also can't see CBDCs as being something that's built on top of Bitcoin, for example, or something that's backed by Bitcoin. It's like I I don't think like as far as governments running things, I think they want to run everything, and so I think that they'll try to do these kinds of payment systems, and so they could run the entire thing and inflate their own digital currencies, or at the same time they will try to, tax and regulate and all that other stuff, the decentralized infrastructure and coins, so that they kind of hedge their bets either way. So they hopefully get to, on their side, I mean, hopefully get to control the financial system of the future, and if they don't, they at least own a part of the other financial system of the future. So like, I wonder how long it's going to be until you have the Federal Reserve of the U.S., for example, running a Bitcoin mining farm, or something like that, or the central bank of like the European
Hmm.
Central Bank running an Ethereum validator node or something. Like I think that we're going to start seeing that happen in the future, because I think that the world is starting to accept that this is a part of the future, and even the people who don't want to. But at some point, I think that they're also not going to accept that they don't have a big part in this future. They still want to have a seat at this new table. And so I think That's when you start seeing like, for example, El Salvador knows they can't, like, their own money is not something that a lot of people care about. So they don't want to create another money. Instead, they want to just say, well, I'm going to just use Bitcoin because that's like the way the world's going. And if we are the licensed Bitcoin operators in the country, then we will still control the money that's being used in the future, even though the one in the past didn't work out so well.
I just it gets scary when you think about the whole apocalypse scenario of if you really have a 100% surveillable global monetary system. Then again, you have to wonder where the competition between the US and China is gonna end up, because then that's the thing, right? Which one is the main surveillance system that you want, and who's your boss? So if it is the US, I would tend to think that they would at least be you're American, so you're gonna disagree with me, or maybe not, but that they're at least going to be more in favor or guarding human rights, especially with the whole politically correct movement.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's the Chinese, it's just going to be full Big Brother. But that's the thing, right? Who's calling the shots here?
Well, that's the thing is as far as the future systems, I think that every government tries to get away with as much power as they can get. And I think that the more it's only restricted by realism. And so one thing that I think is kind of funny is China clearly sees itself as a huge global player. I mean, it obviously is. There's no doubt about that. But they obviously see themselves as the largest global player because of how they've treated Bitcoin, because it became a threat to them, right? Because they had a lot of infrastructure for Bitcoin in China, and then they had a lot of, like, the majority of the infrastructure there, which constituted a lot of potential capital flight, because a lot of people mining Bitcoin, at least having it and having money that can leave the country. And if you think that Bitcoin's going to be part of the future, or at least crypto in general, and that was like China's big thing, is China was running this stuff. China was basically running crypto for a little while, and they got rid of that, right? They banned it because they wanted control, which a smaller country would not do because they wouldn't feel like it's worth the risk. But China apparently thought that, yeah.
Wasn't it the thing that they were just getting rid of Bitcoin mining in the provinces that were using coal for it the most?
Yes, I believe that was the way they first did it. There were some other trading restrictions as well, but basically, the net effect was getting rid of a giant amount of mining. And that's the other thing that I thought was very interesting, is what was obvious if you pay attention, but not being said explicitly, which was that the entire environmental thing was completely manufactured. That I believe that people talk a lot about this environmental stuff. I mean, obviously not the average person, not people who care about the environment, but governments have been using this as a tool to basically get at China for having a cheap, source of electricity, just as a way, like, they can't say, oh, we don't like what you're doing, China. They got to say, but we just really care about the environment. And so they've been and then that's where the Bitcoin thing came, is like, they really didn't want China in control of this much of the partially what could be the money of the future, or just this much of this big, valuable thing. And so they're like, oh, environment. Have you noticed everyone shut up now? No one talks about that. I mean, there's still articles around, the occasional person, but this push disappeared as soon as China was like, oh, we don't want to be cracked down on anymore. We're going to, like, remove this part. And now everyone's happy. And it's kind of funny how quickly that happened. But it was a clear geopolitical ploy at play there, where people were trying to, get power over China without actually saying the politically incorrect thing, which is what Trump was saying, which is China. And so they didn't want to do that, but they still wanted to do that. And so they talked environment instead.
I still can't get over the fact that Charles Hoskinson is 33, man. I'm wondering, but with China in general, you could say, just for the sake of fun of being the devil's advocate, you could say that they have the ultimate laugh here because of the way the US reacted to a threat created by its own quote unquote free market, which was Facebook's coin, right? So when we saw Mark Zuckerberg go to Congress, it was clearly a sign that they were really scared of the whole Diem thing.
Yeah.
Or it was Libra at the moment. And they just pull him in to give him like the big scare to show him who's the boss. It was like this whole horrible display of power. So they could have that argument, right? And I would say that they're right to say like, okay, well, at least we were threatened by Bitcoin and not by this shitty social media stable coin.
Although the thing with that is, with the Zuckerberg situation, first, I think that there's a reason why they freaked out over that before crypto. And the first thing is, I think that they saw it as a more credible threat because crypto's speculative. It goes up and down in value, whereas the Libra would be more stable. And they also had a more, because no one uses crypto for payments other than like me and 5 other people. But like, because of that, I think they thought, oh, this is a more credible threat to the payment system. But I think the biggest thing is Facebook is already, or the social media giants are already almost like nation state levels of power as far as influence, as far as what they can do. And I think the government was like, well, we'll let you have all this money as long as you keep donating to our campaigns, which they did. But I think what happened was, okay, wait, we let you have all this control over the media and over communication and over the way people organize. Let you have all this power over society, but then you're trying to control the money too. No, that's too big, because if Facebook ran Facebook and the money, why not just tell the U.S. federal government to pack up and go home because there's a new king in town? Like at that point, Facebook is the real power. Kind of like, like the cartels of Mexico. It's not necessarily the government controls everything. It's like the reality of who's in charge is a little bit, murkier. And so I think that was a big pushback against Zuckerberg for getting too much, money and, too much power over the money.
In some countries, sorry, my phone is ringing. I just trying to shut it off. And in some parts of Mexico, that's definitely the case. That you have like a drug overlord that controls the whole town, and you're right. Like that very well could be what could happen with these social media companies. I did an article earlier in the week. I did an article about the role of Elon Musk and of Jack Dorsey in the future of crypto. So I think we were talking about this as well before. And Jack seems to, in my opinion at least, Jack seems to have his heart in the right place. Elon as well, but coming from like a different perspective of he's really like not taking the whole thing very seriously. And one thing that always strikes me from Jack is that he seems to have this thing between hands that snowballed out of his control. In that case, I don't think they want that much power, right? Twitter at least seems to, as opposed to Facebook that wants to grab power, Twitter seems to try and back away from it. And now they're rolling this Ethereum and Bitcoin addresses thing. Do you think that's just a stunt, or is that like the entry point for something bigger?
It's really hard to tell. And it's because like I always trust people's actions over their words. Although I also take
Mm-hmm.
people at their word unless they give me reason to say otherwise. And also, you can translate a lot of what they're saying, even though their words don't like directly translate to what they're meaning. They're actually saying clearly something different while they're saying it. But it's important to know that Jack Dorsey owns Square, the number one, as far as I know, like one number one payment processor in the U.S. or
Mm-hmm.
like one of the top ones, one of the big ones around the world. And Square has been getting into crypto a lot, or they've been forever. And so, in fact, I remember in 2014, the Square commercial point of sale system briefly enabled Bitcoin for online only payments. And then they were talking about they're going to ship a separate physical device for accepting crypto payments. And then then that just kind of went away. But that was like 2014. That was a long time ago. And so they've been in this space for a while. And so for commercial purposes, Jack Dorsey definitely wants to see, crypto succeed, and he wants a seat at that table. And so as far as like doing these addresses and like all this talk about that stuff and all his like lightning laser eyes and all this kind of like all that this posturing, I think there's a few things. He could see that this is the future, want to be the number one payment processor for the new money, and try to ingratiate himself with the culture so people trust him and say, oh, Jack's got a payment solution. We're going to go with whatever he does. It could be that. It could be just that he's trying to get into this space. And anytime he wants to pump crypto by saying, oh, look, you can use crypto on your Twitter, then everyone goes, oh my gosh, it's the future. And then the value of his company goes up. It could be that. It could be that he's genuinely trying to implement, payment kind of things. But I mean, it's kind of weird that he's trying to. Quick little tangent, I guess, on the Twitter doing crypto. Just posting the addresses in your little bio. First off, people already do that. Having a useful little button is like not super useful, and people who uses static addresses anyway, it's like it's such a boomer kind of a thing to do, sort of. But he's been talking about
Yeah, it's a little bit.
yeah, he's been talking about Lightning for crypto users. Now, I don't know how he's going to do it, but if you open 220 million or so Lightning channels, that's like 220 million like Bitcoin transactions. That's basically, if there's 220,000 a day, that's just like a million days of monopolizing the network just to open up Lightning channels to every Twitter user. So no way is that what he's actually going to do. Now, could he just do one mega channel and just have everyone kind of go through that one and he just sort of runs the whole channel? Yes, but that's still, if you want each Twitter user to be able to receive $10 of Bitcoin through Lightning, you have to have $10 in inbound liquidity in there. So if he wants to do just $10 of receiving capacity to 220 million Twitter users, that's 2.2 million in Bitcoin just locked up just so they can do $10. So I have a feeling it's going to be something completely different. It's going to be like a custodial centralized solution, and they'll just do Lightning somewhere else or something. I don't know. It's very hard, very interesting to see where that's going to go.
What he said they were going to roll out is this non-custodial hardware wallet. Well, hardware wallet. They're
Mm-hmm.
not custodial. Um, by and they seem to think that by creating easier to use physical devices for people to be in control of their own Bitcoin,
Mm-hmm.
that would sort of give them an edge about how they use it, which I think is going on the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
But just you're right that the whole thing that he's also the CEO of Square and that he founded this thing, it
Mm-hmm.
also goes against the idea that he doesn't like money and he just like the whole thing just snowballed out of his hands, right? Like
Of
he
course.
clearly likes building these giants. And the other thing is that this blue sky thing, this decentralized social media protocol. Did you have a chance to take a look at their website?
No, I have not.
So if you go into the website, I did it for this article that I wrote. Is the the website is blueskyweb.org, and they're building a social web. And this is just basically a website to state their intentions and the fact that they're hiring. They're not doing more through it. Like they just appointed a CEO, by the way.
Okay.
She looks like she's developed. Well, she developed Happening before, which
Okay.
was an app for events, I guess, but I never
Mm-hmm.
used it. I mean, at least here it never catched up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called, and it's just a very simple text. It's 4 paragraphs talking about how people used to use email, RSS feeds, XMPP chats, and these technologies that people would use in a more decentralized way, and that they're trying to build a protocol that sort of reflects that kind of thinking. Um, but again, this is a project that was in the works like 2 years ago. I think they announced it and then they buried it, and now they resurfacing it. I don't know. They Vitalik also expressed his that he was a bit worried of it because
Mm-hmm.
if the this is the recurring theme of this chat, I guess. If this big centralized player comes and offers you a decentralized solution, chances are that it's not that decentralized, or that they're planning on a new way to profit from it. And by profit, you don't necessarily mean money, right?
Yeah. That'll be that's definitely going to be interesting. Like a lot of moving parts. It's I'm kind of getting like lost train of thought because I'm just thinking about how we're hit this point where just about everyone is trying to do something crypto related, and there's just a lot of, as you mentioned, like 4 paragraph simple type site things about what they're going to do about it, but then it's like, well, what are you going to do about it? And the details just kind of never come a little bit. It's just funny how like everyone says, oh, I'm going to build this on a Bitcoin, I'm going to do that, and then you know remember when Kim.com came around and he said he was going to build like mega upload to like the sequel, he was going to build it on Bitcoin, and then he became really big into Bitcoin Cash, and he's been promoting that, but like where's this big thing now? Like, it doesn't mean things take time to create, of course, but like everyone's just saying like I'm going to build this big thing on Bitcoin. It's like, are you though? I don't know. We're in a strange place right now.
For me, the funniest one is
Mm-hmm.
this Acon City thing. But please
Yeah,
know that I've been trying to hide the fact that I didn't have time to untangle my headphones, and I just like trying to hide them so they
it's
don't look
okay. You
like all
might just
messy.
have chest hair.
Um, but it, Akon City, man, remember this? Like the rapper
Mm-hmm.
singer, he was a singer.
Yeah.
Akon, he's announcing. Well, he announced a while ago that he's gonna build this whole like futuristic city. I think in Kenya or in
Mm-hmm.
Ethiopia, one of these African countries, and that project. It seems. I talked to someone that's like working together with him,
Mm-hmm.
and the first thing that they say, this is Chris from Effect.ai, a
Yeah.
very nice company, and he said that he was very surprised when he met Akon about how legit he was and about how well informed he was on the
Mm-hmm.
technology front. Um, that it didn't seem to him like another celebrity trying to profit off these
Yeah.
ideas,
Not
right?
another Paris Hilton.
But at the same time, if you feel like this thing has a shot, I think your mind is in a different planet than me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, there's so many moving parts, and everyone's trying to do something with this. That having a big project right now seems like more of more of something that would drag you back as opposed to something that would help you.
Yeah.
Like everything can change from an instant to the other.
Yeah. If you're serious in this thing, I think there's a lot of people are investigating this, and a lot of people are probably seeing that crypto's not an industry and a mature technology yet. It's kind of like a natural resource at this point. It's really rough. It's just like, yeah, we're going to use the gold standard to like run our country economy and stuff. And it's like, all right, well, you go visit a gold mine. There's a bunch of gold. Like, how are we going to trade with this? Like, first off, what are the exchange rates? You know, how are we going to turn them into coins so people can use them? What are like the markets like? What are, standards of, trade? And like, then there's just so much stuff they haven't figured out. And then they're just like, yeah, I don't know. And then they just sort of are on the periphery for such a long time, just waiting for the technology to mature. And so I really think that what you're going to see is the technology is going to take leaps forward at some point, and not the base layer stuff, because the base layer stuff is progressing. It's doing okay. But the front ends have to change. Like, for example, do you remember when the Winklevoss twins at like a year or two ago at the Consensus Conference did this whole, you can now spend crypto at like 100,000 merchants in the US or something like that. And then like nothing ever happened from that sort of.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still going, by the way. It still exists. Flexa is still a company. They still have this solution where you can deposit into the Spedden. It's like spend with a weird D in a different place. Spedden wallet. You could still like enter your amount and then go to a, they still work, but it just didn't succeed yet. Like no one is going to deposit their crypto into a custodial service, walk over to like a bank or walk over like a Starbucks and say, oh, I want to pay with your Flexa integration. And they're like, oh, where's the Flexa button? They call the manager. The manager comes over. Oh, it's this one. Oh, okay, sorry. And then they enter the amount and then they scan a QR code on the user's phone. And like, no one's going to just do all this. It's not, it might work, but it doesn't work, And so as soon as you have someone who figures out how to make the payments work, for example, like to work to where people will willingly use it and become repeat customers and it makes sense, then all of a sudden, all these people that are just making these like promises are going to start actually delivering, because at that point, I think they're going to be like, oh, really? We'll just do what those guys did, and they'll just do what those guys did, and then it'll work. But until then, a lot of this stuff is very like, I'm not taking it seriously yet. Maybe as a statement of intent, but that's it.
Devil's advocate again.
Oh,
Wouldn't
yeah.
you say that if after 9 years, not 9, how old is Bitcoin? 10 years? More than 10
Like
years?
12 years?
That if after 10 years we haven't managed to make the payments part work, we should just give up?
I'll add some nuance to that and just say,
We're fighting legacy systems here, so it's not a completely fair question.
yes. So what I would definitely say is no. Because, so first off, I have a complex opinion on this as someone who has been using crypto for 8 years, only for money, really. Like I haven't traded at all. Never used an exchange. And it was exclusively for Bitcoin from 2013 to 2016. And it was a few others since then, but mostly Dash for real, like payments. Because of what I've seen, first off, the technology wasn't there, and now it kind of is, but the products and services aren't. The big thing that hasn't, first off, I think that if Bitcoin had scaled, I think that it would be a very different story today, because you had all this momentum behind it and people were adopting it. Overstock was taking it for payments, all these kinds of things. Like it was moving forward. It was still new. There were still problems, but it was moving forward. And then when Bitcoin became slow and expensive, that kind of died off. It wasn't that it moved on to other coins. It tried to, but a lot of that energy just died off and it has to be built up again. And so Bitcoin continued on and became much more mainstream today through its pure store of value kind of a thing. But then the payments thing didn't catch up. So I think it would be a very different story today if the number one project had not transferred to a different use case. And then the other thing is, like, I see how close we are. So, I'm used to spending crypto in a retail environment on a day-to-day basis. And it works and it's simple and it works better than fiat in a lot of ways. The challenge is the merchant systems are not really that built up yet. Like there's some, they're like basic solutions, but then you have to open a different app and then they don't have like all the accounting. and then the conversion things back. And a lot of this infrastructure isn't built up, not because it can't be, but because the demand isn't there yet, because there's not enough people like me trying to spend it. And if there were, then there you go. And the thing is, crypto is good, but it's not good enough to where most people who can buy anything with their card are going to buy crypto just to spend it. So I think what we're going to see in the future is people were going to have crypto because that's all they have, because they don't trust fiat anymore. Even the dollar, king daddy of fiat, starts to become inflated to nothing. I think that people are going to start having more crypto, then they're going to want to spend it. And also, I think when you see financial censorship. So in some way, I think CBDCs might be a good way to starting people on actually spending their crypto, because if everyone's using these digital things that are easier to censor, a lot more people will have their payments censored. And what does that do? That creates scarcity for freedom of transaction, which increases the market price of freedom providing solutions such as decentralized digital cash. And then that'll kind of flow into that. So I think we're kind of early to the payments part of things, because when you use a different money completely, it's a much bigger change than like downloading a separate app. Like anyone can just like go on Uniswap and like play with their little tokens or something and then go back to their usual life. But to change your life to where now you have to have a different money now and you're going to use that, that's a much harder thing. I think people had a more compelling use case to get into DeFi, for example, because they can make a lot of money without KYC, which is one thing I'm going to get to the story in just a second. They could do a lot of that stuff, and they could not with the old system, but they could buy their coffee with the old system. And it's just that when all their money is now in this other stuff is when that'll lead first, and then people seek to spend it.
I would once you start talking about non-censorable money alternatives, then you have to think about what those are, right? Because, for example, Bitcoin, they can just as easily track your Bitcoin payments. So what are people going to use? And are the things that people using actually going to, well, they're going to have to reflect that value, right? So as always, my money is on Monero for becoming the go-to privacy solution. I just wouldn't select any of the others for privacy itself. Like we said before, obviously Dash has a very good use case for everyday usage as payments, but then that can also be traced. It's not perfect for that. You could have it when people operated in a gray area. For example, if they decide that with CBDCs you can transact with anyone in the world, but payments to a certain region have to get checked by the authorities first or whatever, which is something I definitely see them doing. Like, you cannot send money to, name it, Afghanistan, because there's some problems there and there's not enough freedom in there.
Yeah, of course.
So you have to go through a check whenever you want to send money there. Then of course people are going to send Bitcoin, but then that raises also, oh, why are you sending Bitcoin? What are you trying to do? Who are you sending it to? Atomic swaps in that regard become pretty important, I would say. But we've been on this one for a while, so if you want, let's go to the NFTs thing.
Yes, let's wrap up with the NFT thing. So this is pretty hilarious for a few reasons. So a British tween, meaning like a 10, 11, 12-year-old, 13-year-old, right, earns almost $400,000 worth of NFT sales without a bank account. And Benjamin Ahmed created tokenized digital pictures of whale emojis and sold it for NFTs on school vacation. First off, it reads like some like dystopian future comedy. Like, what the hell is this? Like, this is the way people are doing. It's so when he was on holiday from the school, like during his summer vacation or whatever, he goes and sells all this stuff. He makes like $40,000 worth of this stuff selling his viral, NFT'd artworks. However, he doesn't have a bank account. You know why? Because he's a freaking kid. And if you think about it, this is the first off. I mean, I haven't had a bank account in 5 years, so I can sympathize with the little guy. But it's also, this is the kind of thing that shows you the value of crypto. It's not that anyone can make $400,000. Like anyone can kind of do that in other things. It's just that this kid can without like backers, without his parents hiring a manager who runs his accounts on his behalf like a child star. He's just some kid and he does it. And think about how many kids, how much creativity and value, because the market valued this thing. You can't deny that. The market valued this. How much value is waiting to be created by people who don't have access to financial services or who would not do that if they had to like set up a corporation to avoid taxes or something. Like, no, he just made a thing and the money came in. And so, I mean, I think it's a beautiful story because this kid clearly makes something the world wants. And he's able to do this and he doesn't, but the bank won't touch him right now, or he hasn't tried and they probably won't. But he just has all this money unbanked on the internet because, or not on the internet, but you know what I'm saying, like in crypto with, digital stuff because the crypto does not care who he is. And I think that we're going to see a lot of these kinds of things. That guy wants to spend crypto because what is he going to do? How is he going to buy? I mean, he can buy stuff online, but what happens if he wants to? What if he says, you know what, Mom and Dad, I'm richer than you. Go screw yourselves. I'm moving out of the house or whatever. Like he just wants to do that. Okay. Well, how is he going to like leave? Well, I got to get an Uber. Well, how are you going to pay the Uber driver? He doesn't have a bank account. Well, maybe he'll want a solution that we can pay the Uber driver in crypto. Maybe he wants to get a hotel room for a little while. Maybe he wants to buy a house, but like he doesn't have that. But then he will really want to do stuff where you can actually pay with crypto. So to this kid, I mean, if he hates his parents, hopefully he doesn't. Hopefully he has a beautiful family that loves him. But if he doesn't, let's smuggle him over here to New Hampshire and he doesn't have to worry about anything, huh?
I'm gonna say that I'm happy that you decided to go with the wholesome side of the story because we've been talking about a lot of apocalyptic shit in here. So I'm just happy we're happy for the kid. He does look his age and like a certain someone. But I'm going to say that who's buying these NFTs, man? Who's buying $400,000 worth of whale emojis?
It's funny. It's an evolution of the market. I think people see that the concept of NFTs are going to be huge. And so when they make an NFT, they think, oh, it's huge. And they throw money at it. But the funniest thing to me is I've seen some investment funds talking about deploying a fund that's an NFT basket. It's like, it's like a basket of stocks, but it's NFTs. It's like they just buy a few here and there and hedge there. And it's just like, but that's not what it's for. Like, you should do a basket of cryptos, sure, but like crypto assets, but not NFTs. But then that's the thing is like the free market is undefeated. It does what it wants. And I remember watching, I think it was called like The Great Art Heist or something like that, some Netflix documentary about some art museum in Boston that got a whole bunch of priceless artwork stolen from them. They never recovered. And in the process of that, they're just going over all the monetary value, like all the use cases for art. And like one big thing is like money laundering. So like you buy a ton, you buy a painting for like a whole bunch of money and then you get to like hide your money in that. Or another thing is people used it as ransom tools for prison. So let's say a criminal syndicate steals a bunch of priceless artworks. One of their people gets thrown into prison because they get caught for whatever. And then they take the artwork and use that as ransom. Say the guy in prison says, oh, can I get a lower sentence if I give you a clue that leads to the discovery of this artwork? And they actually negotiate lower sentences because of that. And so there's all these like practical applications for that. And that's old school artwork, which is difficult to hide and store and stuff. Now, what can NFTs do besides just, oh, I got a cool collector's item? Like, how can they be, traded? And so the problem is it's like the whale emojis or whatever. Like, that's a little dumb. But in the future, first off, I don't think that this guy's whale emojis will necessarily lose value over time, because of a historical context. Like it's like
Yeah.
how valuable are cave paintings these days? I mean, they look like shit, like little stick drawings and stuff. Like, but they're super valuable because they were in the early days. You
I
know?
agree. See, that's a great point. That's a great
Mm-hmm.
point, because these things, the Beeple
Mm-hmm.
NFT, the one that sold for 69 million because this guy was doing
Mm-hmm.
digital art for free his whole life, and then he just put up like a collection of it and sold it for
Mm-hmm.
69 million dollars. And the guy that bought it obviously bought it as a flex move, right? Because no one had paid so much for an NFT before that.
Yeah.
Now that one NFT, I don't think is gonna drop in value because, like you said, there's a whole historical context. There's a whole thing. Even I'm blanking on similar bubbles before, but well, baseball cards. Let's say
Mm-hmm.
baseball cards. Some baseball cards will retain their value. Pokemon cards, whatever. Some of them do. Some of them just maintain it, especially if they were like a big piece of news back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
So that thing does happen. I'm gonna say that I saw these whale emoji things, and I thought they were super cute, like way before this kid sold so many of it. Now I'm jealous because now we're starting to also see people flipping these NFTs that they get for
Mm-hmm.
so much.
Yeah. It's you know what I think is going to be what I'm waiting for because first off, I'm not that creative. This isn't my space, but also I'm waiting for NFTs to become solid because right now, first off, they're too expensive to create on like Ethereum, for example, and I just don't want to spend all this money for something that I'm you have to try a million times before you get something successful maybe. But also the NFT is nothing without the thing that it captures, like the image. If in for example, the image and the image on a decentralized storage platform and not just like a centralized website that does this because what happens the website goes away, it gets shut down. It's not actually decentralized, so you have to have decentralized storage and a decentralized reference point between the nft and the actual between the nft and the
Mm.
actual thing. Once I'm comfortable that the whole thing is censorship resistant, the actual whole NFT, then I might start jumping in a little bit more. In the meantime, it still can have a lot of value. I'm just at a distance, kind of watching it develop. But yeah, I think for how many NFTs have been created versus how many have gone viral. Or you could be someone like Ken Bozak, who he was just in the live chat like a half hour ago or so, but he calls himself the CEO of NFTs. He cranks out NFTs like nothing, like just over and over and over and over and over. And he just like sold so many of them. And I mean, I'm not sure if they're all going to be priceless, but he just puts out so many and he's making bank. So, or he's making debank, as I should say. But
Mm.
I don't know. I think that the phase of NFTs, we're at the discovery phase, but at some point we're going to have not only ones, as I mentioned, that are robust, like they're actually going to stand the test of time. They're going to be valuable forever. But the real thing is when NFTs start to be used for otherworldly purposes, for physical world purposes, for example. Like, for example, let's just say you have your concert ticket issued as an NFT. And so that's how you get into the
Mm.
concert. And so it's a collectible because this was the one that was used to get into the concert. But then, like 20 years later, the band does a big reunion tour and only the original, they sell like super expensive tickets. Or you could use one of these old tickets from their first show, these old NFT tickets to like still get in. That's when the stuff start to explode in popularity. I mean, right now it's a lot of speculation. It's early days, but someday I think it could become huge in a legitimate sense.
There is another worldly use case that I would say is pretty good, and that is music. And
Mm-hmm.
not in the sense of treating music like we're treating art right now,
Mm-hmm.
which is like good in itself, but for music, you would also be rewarded for sort of believing in an artist if
Mm-hmm.
the incentives are set well enough, and there has to be then a legal framework as well because royalties are complicated things
Of course.
as far as I understand. But if the royalty systems are set up right, like You would actually have all the hipsters that say that, I know him since before he was big. Okay, now they're making bank as well
Of
for
course.
for actually trusting these bands before they made it or not, and then they just stop the bragging like you didn't believe
Mm-hmm.
enough. Um, we used to, first of all, Tesos as a chain started doing really well with NFTs because of this platform Hiket Nonk,
Mm-hmm.
and it's actually pretty cheap to mint NFTs in that platform because it uses the Tesos
Mm-hmm.
network. It's never, it doesn't face scalability problems, some might say, because it doesn't have enough use cases.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, it's pretty cheap to operate, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And we did this guide for institutions to invest in cryptocurrencies with the company I work with D-Core. And this guide is like a 50 something page document that very, it's like a big crypto for dummies
Mm-hmm.
document that also includes some stuff that might be useful to institutions, sort of like regulations and shit. But overall it's a pretty light read. I send it to everyone that wants to learn about crypto and get acquainted with it, because it covers it from the very beginning. And at the bottom of it, we put a little. This guide was minted as an NFT in
Mm-hmm.
this platform with this address and using this contract, so they can also be used as social technology,
Mm-hmm.
because then with this we don't have to worry about intellectual property rights. Let's say it's not the same as doing copyright, but in any case, there is a stamp on a document that says, and it's NFT, it's on the blockchain. And we have proof that this document was created by us at this date, and no one can come up with another proof that they did it before. So
Mm-hmm.
it's they can also be used as social technology, and that's a very worldly use case, right? And then if this guide catches up and becomes like a very popular document, which I don't think there are very popular documents, but let's imagine that happens, then we could even sell it and whatever, and whoever has it then controls those same rights without us doing all the paperwork. So that's one worldly use case that hasn't been explored as much, I think. Just using it for social,
Social
how would you
proofs.
call it? Social proof.
Yeah. Like, I used to be a nonprofit fundraising, and you could get people to donate a lot more if you gave them an exclusive token along with it. It's like you get a little like lapel pin that only
Mm.
comes with like high value donors, and an NFT version of that is, I'm sure every podcast in the world is going to exploit the crap out of that. I will be exploiting the crap out of it at some point, but not yet. But we'll we'll see. But yeah, we're just about at 2 hours of this thing. This thing went quite long, so let's start wrapping it up. Where can people find more about you and what you do and follow all the stuff? Show me all your stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's all right. I've enjoyed it, but I also
Mm-hmm.
have to run. So, um, my stuff is quite spread everywhere. They're
Mm-hmm.
gonna see me, of course, on your Twitter. My Twitter is Carlos CANCAB,
Mm-hmm.
Carlos Cancav, and they can find the podcast on YouTube. The It's on the D-Core channel, which, as I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, this company I work with.
Yes.
We have quite a bunch of cool things going on. We're a decentralized engine for crypto research. So if you want to check that out, you're more than welcome. It's the dash core. And the podcast is called Blockchain People, although that name hasn't catched up that much because everyone just calls it the D-Core podcast. But yeah,
Yeah.
feel free to check that out, guys. It's we try and have as many as these conversations as possible, just trying to talk intelligently about this crypto world that keeps giving us so much.
Yeah, a couple little notes on that. First off, you know, Bitcoin or crypto people. It's funny because a friend of mine, I was just on her podcast. She runs something called the Humans of Crypto, or she calls it a peer-to-peer podcast, and it's a really good podcast. But it's like a very similar kind of branding vibe. But yeah, the Decor podcast is kind of what because the channel is Decor, so that's kind of a thing to know it by. Also, I should
Yeah.
note that uh, I had this podcast had quite a few more people watching on Odysee, which is the blockchain based platform, than on YouTube. Like right now, I think YouTube at its peak got to like 7 or 8 people, which usually it's a little bit more, but that's fine. But it was like Odysee was like 33 or so at its peak, and so yeah, it's cool. I always celebrate when the non-legacy platforms do way better, and I always have a link down below in the YouTube thing with the Odysee stream, so you can go watch there instead because I prefer it. But I didn't even tell people go watch on Odysee, please, but they did. So yay, thank you everyone. All right. Might as well be time to wrap this thing up. Thanks so much for being on. It's been a very enjoyable, very long chat. And we're about 20 seconds before the 2-hour mark. So I'm going to roll the ending credits. And then, yeah, we'll see you around.